Emily was just 19 when her entire life turned upside down. Within a few short months, she lost both of her parents, and suddenly the responsibility of holding the family together fell heavily on her young shoulders. She had always dreamed of studying law and had even planned to apply to a university in Lusaka. But that dream slipped away the moment she looked into the tear-streaked eyes of her younger siblings. They needed meals, clothes, and school fees. Emily knew no one else would step in, so she did. She put her ambitions aside, rolled up her sleeves, and began working at a garment factory. At first, it was a single shift, but soon she was taking on doubles, stitching from dawn until late at night. Her hands became swollen and blistered from endless sewing. She came home drained, yet still found the strength to cook, clean, and help her siblings with their schoolwork. Every coin she earned went toward keeping them afloat. Emily never bought herself new clothes, never spent evenings with friends, never allowed herself a moment of peace. Neighbors admired her, whispering, "Emily is such a strong girl," marveling at how she managed to carry everything. But behind closed doors, her pain remained unseen. At night, she buried her face in her pillow, grieving for her parents and wondering if her life would ever become more than just survival. She locked her dreams away deep in her heart, convincing herself that as long as her siblings were cared for, it was enough. Yet deep down, she could feel herself slowly fading. In the beginning, her family's gratitude warmed her heart. Her siblings hugged her after school. Her aunts praised her for being the glue that held everyone together. Neighbors called her the strong one. But as the years passed, the thank yous disappeared. What once was sacrifice turned into expectation. Cooking, cleaning, paying bills, covering school costs. None of it was seen as choice anymore, but obligation. Her younger brother, Sifo, eventually grew up and secured a decent job. Emily had long dreamed of this day, hoping it would mean she could finally breathe, maybe even save a little for herself. But instead of helping, Sifo spent his earnings on flashy clothes, nights out, and the latest phone. When Emily asked him to contribute, he laughed. "You've managed all these years. Why stop now?" His words cut, but she stayed silent. Her younger sister, Nality, was no different. A teenager full of opinions, she mocked Emily often. "You act like you're our mother," she would sneer whenever Emily tried to guide her. Sometimes she accused Emily of being controlling, as if caring about their future was a crime. Those words pierced deeper than any insult Emily had ever known. She had sacrificed her own youth so her siblings could have theirs. Yet they treated her like an obstacle. Even the extended family, the ones who once praised her, began to change. At gatherings, her aunts whispered behind her back. "Still not married," they would say. "Still living in the same house. She's becoming a burden." Emily sometimes overheard these comments. Though she tried to ignore them, each word pressed into her chest like stone. How could they call her a burden when she had carried everyone else for so long? The more she gave, the less it was noticed. Meals on the table went unacknowledged. Bills paid without thanks. Her sacrifices had become invisible. She started to feel like a shadow in her own home. Always there, always working, but never truly seen. At night, she lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of her small room, wondering if her parents would be proud of her or disappointed that the family she held together no longer valued her. She didn't ask for much, just respect, gratitude, maybe a little help. Instead, the more she gave, the more she was taken for granted. Slowly, she realized the bitter truth. To them, she wasn't a sister who had given up everything. She was just someone expected to keep giving, no matter the cost. One day, a family gathering began like any other. Laughter, chatter, the aroma of food filling the air. Emily had spent the week preparing. Using her own money, she bought meat, drinks, and decorations. She cooked most of the dishes herself, moving through the kitchen with quiet diligence. Relatives arrived in Kietwe, smiling, hugging, praising the food. None of them noticed the exhaustion etched into her eyes. Throughout the party, Emily moved from room to room, making sure everyone ate, ensuring the children were cared for. She thought she was invisible, but believed at least her efforts were appreciated. That belief shattered in one cruel moment. Stepping into the hallway to catch her breath, she overheard laughter from the living room. She froze when she heard an aunt say, "Emily is living off us now. She's a burden." The words sliced through her like a knife. Another voice chimed in. Imagine, all these years and nothing to show. No husband, no house of her own, still here like a child. They laughed, sipping wine she had paid for, eating food she had cooked with her own tired hands. Emily's knees weakened. Her ears rang, her chest tightened. These were the very people who had eaten because she worked double shifts. The ones whose children studied because she gave everything. And yet they mocked her, called her a burden. Her hands trembled as she stepped back. For a moment, she wanted to storm in and scream. But something inside shifted. Instead of rage, a strange calm washed over her, mixed with a deep, burning ache. She didn't clear the dishes. She didn't rush to serve. For the first time in years, she let go. Without a word, Emily walked out the door. The night air hit her face, cold against her hot tears. She couldn't see clearly, but she kept walking, away from the house, away from the voices, away from the betrayal. Each step was heavy, but within her, something new stirred. Her heart was breaking, but beneath the heartbreak, a fire began to burn. For so long, she had lived only for them, sacrificing, giving, serving. But in that painful moment, she realized something she had never dared to think. If her family could forget her worth, then maybe it was time she remembered it herself. And with that thought, Emily disappeared into the Kietwe night, carrying both her sorrow and the first sparks of a new beginning. A few days later, Emily sat alone in her small room, feeling completely hollow. The laughter and cruel words from that gathering still echoed in her ears. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped in her chest. Instead, she began cleaning almost frantically, as if tidying her surroundings could calm the storm inside. That was when she reached for the old wooden trunk that had once belonged to her father. It had sat untouched in the corner for years, covered in dust. She had never dared to open it fully, perhaps out of fear of the memories it might awaken. Yet that night, something deep within urged her to lift the lid. Slowly, she raised it, and the scent of aged paper and wood drifted through the room. Inside were his old shirts, worn photographs, and the simple tools he once used around the house. Beneath a stack of carefully folded clothes, she uncovered a sealed envelope. Her hands froze. Her name was written across the front in her father's handwriting. For a long moment, she just stared, her eyes brimming with tears. It felt as though he had reached out to her from beyond the grave, as if he had known she would one day be here. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and pulled out the documents inside. The first was a deed. A legal paper showing a plot of land in Livingstone registered solely under her name. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never known it existed. Next, she unfolded a small note tucked beside it. The familiar, strong strokes of her father's handwriting filled the page. My daughter, if the world ever forgets your worth, build your own. Emily pressed the letter against her chest as tears spilled freely down her face. She could almost hear his voice speaking the words. In that instant, the crushing weight she had carried began to ease. Her father had seen her worth. Even before his death, he had thought of her future, and left her something no one could take away. She sat on the floor for hours, clutching the letter and staring at the deed. It felt like a hidden door had been unlocked, revealing a secret path waiting for her to step through. For so long, she had given everything to others, losing herself in the process. Now her father's words reminded her that her life still carried meaning, that she had the power to create something of her own. The land in Livingstone was more than property. It was possibility. It was freedom. It was hope. A spark lit in her chest, one she hadn't felt in years. All the exhaustion, bitterness, and endless sacrifice were suddenly met with a new thought. What if I built something for myself? That night, Emily didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she held her father's letter close and whispered into the silence. Baba, I hear you. I will build my own. For the first time in years, she fell asleep with hope warming her heart. She couldn't stop thinking about her father's words. Each morning when she woke and every night before bed, she read them again. If the world ever forgets your worth, build your own. The phrase became a seed planted deep inside her, and she knew she had to act. But first, she needed to confirm the land was truly hers. One afternoon, she quietly slipped away and visited a lawyer in Lusaka. The deed sat heavy in her bag as she nervously rode the bus. Across the desk, the lawyer adjusted his glasses, studied the papers, and finally looked up with a reassuring smile. Yes, this land belongs to you. It's untouched, still under your name. You are the legal owner. Emily nearly couldn't believe it. For the first time in years, something truly belonged to her. No one could take it. No one could belittle it. She walked out of that office taller, lighter, freer. Back home, she kept her plans hidden. Quietly, she opened a savings account and added a small loan. At night, when everyone else was asleep, she worked under candlelight, sketching ideas in an old notebook: poultry, crops, vegetables. She researched cooperatives, read stories of women starting businesses, and studied how small farms could grow into thriving enterprises. Each page of that notebook was a promise to herself. She would no longer just survive, she would create. Her family noticed the change. She wasn't at their beck and call anymore. She didn't rush to serve them or solve their every problem. They whispered that she was withdrawing, that something was wrong. Naledi mocked her, saying she was wasting her time on foolish dreams. Sifo laughed when he saw her farming books. So now you want to be a farmer? You can't even rest after work, he teased. But Emily didn't argue. She only smiled quietly. They wouldn't understand, and for once their approval didn't matter. For years she had lived only for them, pouring herself out until she was called a burden. Now she was living for herself, and that thought gave her strength. The pain of their rejection was still there, but slowly she was turning it into fuel. Each cruel word pushed her forward. Each doubt drove her to work harder. Every late-night plan, every scribbled idea felt like her father's voice guiding her. For the first time, Emily felt in control. She wasn't just holding her family together anymore. She was building something of her own. Something with her name on it. Something that could one day change everything. Deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. When Emily first visited the land in Livingstone, it was dry, tangled with weeds, and almost forgotten. Many would have dismissed it as worthless, but she saw something else. Holding her father's letter in her hand, she whispered, "This is where my life begins again." It wasn't easy. She had no farming background, no business experience. But what she did have was determination. She began slowly, clearing the land herself. Some days she paid local men to help cut down bushes and turn the soil, but most days she worked alone beneath the burning sun. Her hands blistered, her back ached, her clothes turned to dust. Still she kept going. With her savings and the small loan, she bought a few chickens and basic farming tools. Each morning, she traveled back and forth, tending the poultry and watering her small garden. In the beginning, people laughed. Neighbors shook their heads. That girl is wasting her time. How can she build a farm out of nothing? Even her siblings called her crazy when they heard. But Emily no longer cared. Each time she fed the chickens, each seed she planted, she felt her spirit come alive again. Soon, her work began to bear fruit. The chickens thrived, producing enough eggs to sell at the market. Her vegetables, tomatoes, spinach, maize, sprouted in neat rows. Word spread quickly about the hard-working woman running her own farm. Emily made a choice that surprised many. Instead of hiring random laborers, she sought out women like herself. Widows with no support, single mothers struggling to feed their children. Women who had been cast aside and forgotten. She welcomed them onto her farm, paid them fairly, fed them during shifts, and treated them with dignity. For these women, working with Emily wasn't just a job, it was hope. Before long, her story spread beyond the market. People began calling her the woman of sacrifice, the one who built something out of nothing. Journalists visited her farm, publishing stories about her remarkable journey. Local leaders invited her to speak with other women about independence and perseverance. Investors who admired her vision began reaching out, offering support to expand her work. Emily could hardly believe how quickly her life was changing. What once lived only as a secret dream in her notebook now stood before her. Green fields, clucking chickens, and women working proudly with bright smiles. Each time she walked across her land, her father's letter echoed in her heart. He had urged her to build her own, and she had done exactly that. The farm was no longer just a business. It had grown into a movement, a living symbol of strength and possibility. And as Emily stood in the middle of her thriving fields, she realized something profound. She hadn't only rebuilt her own life, she had created a new beginning for many others as well. It wasn't long before word of Emily's success traveled back to her family in Lusaka. At first, they only caught whispers. Someone mentioned her farm was growing fast. Another said investors were backing her. Soon, stories of her rising influence reached their ears. The very people who once mocked her and called her a burden suddenly remembered her, and one by one, they began appearing at her gate in Livingstone. Sifo came first. He showed up in a polished shirt, trying to look confident, but Emily saw the unease in his eyes. He confessed his job wasn't paying enough, and asked if she could hire him. "We're family, Emily," he said, trying to sound convincing. For a long moment, she looked at him, recalling every time he had ridiculed her, every time he refused to help when she had begged for support. She shook her head softly and answered, "This place is for those who once had no one, like I once had no one. You had choices, Sifo. You didn't stand with me when I needed you most." His face dropped, and without another word he left. Not long after, Nal arrived, dressed in the latest fashion, the scent of perfume trailing behind her. She smiled sweetly and said she wanted to open a boutique. "Cece, just lend me some money. I'll pay you back," she promised. But Emily remembered her sister's cruel laughter. The way she mocked her for acting like a mother, the nights she sneered while Emily studied farming by lamplight. Standing tall in her boots and head wrap, Emily said firmly, "I don't invest in people who once tore me down. This farm was not built on mockery, it is built on respect." Nal's smile vanished, her eyes hardened, and she stormed away in anger. Then came the aunts, the same women who once whispered that Emily was unmarried and a burden. This time they arrived with children in tow, asking for help with school fees. Their voices were sweet, reminding her that family should stand together. Emily listened in silence, but her heart was unshaken. "When I was struggling," she said, "when I carried my siblings alone, you all turned your backs on me. You called me names. You laughed at me. I cannot forget that. This place is for women who were left with nothing, like I was. Not for those who stood by and watched me suffer." The rejection stung them deeply. They couldn't believe the Emily they once controlled now stood strong, untouched by their pleas. Some muttered angrily as they left. Others begged longer, but her answer never changed. As she watched them go, Emily felt no joy in turning them away. It hurt, but it was necessary. She had learned a hard truth. Family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, respect, and support. Those who had betrayed her had lost the right to stand by her side. And for the first time in her life, Emily knew she was not alone anymore. The women working with her, those who believed in her, had become her true family. That Sunday the church hall in Livingstone was full. Families crowded the benches, children rested on their mothers' laps, and gospel songs filled the air. Emily slipped in quietly, as she always did, sitting at the back with her head covered. She never sought attention. But that morning, attention found her. During the announcements, one of her aunts suddenly stood and spoke loudly, her words cutting through the hall. "We need to pray for our niece Emily," she declared. "She has abandoned her family. After all we did for her, she now turns her back on us." Instantly murmurs spread. Heads turned. Whispers rose. All eyes shifted toward Emily. Her chest tightened, her palms grew damp, and for a moment she thought of leaving. But before she could move, Sifo added to the attack. Standing beside the aunt, he said, "Yes, she has forgotten where she came from. She treats us like strangers while she spends her money elsewhere." Shame pressed on Emily like a heavy stone. People she respected were hearing only half the truth. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her throat locked. The murmurs grew louder, some shaking their heads at her. Then something unexpected happened. From the far side of the hall, an elderly widow slowly rose. She had been one of the first women Emily hired. Her voice trembled, but her words rang strong. "No," she said firmly. "This woman did not abandon anyone. She fed us when no one else would. When my children went hungry, she gave us food. When I had no work, she gave me dignity. You call her a burden? She is a blessing." The hall fell silent. Then another woman stood, also from Emily's farm. She gave me a chance when my own family cast me aside. She lifted me when I had nothing. Emily is not the one who abandons, she is the one who saves." One by one more voices rose. A young single mother spoke of how Emily paid her fair wages, so she could send her daughter to school. Another testified that Emily treated them with respect when the world treated them as nothing. Soon the whispers of judgment transformed into a chorus of support. Her aunt and Sifo stood frozen, their plan collapsing before their eyes. Instead of shaming Emily, they had revealed their own bitterness. The congregation, once doubtful, now looked at Emily with admiration. Emily sat quietly, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't asked anyone to defend her, but the truth spoke for itself. For years she had been unseen and unappreciated in her family's home. Now before the whole community, her worth was declared openly. That day, the shame her family tried to throw on her bounced back onto them. And Emily walked out of the church hall with her head high. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt powerful, visible, and free. Her farm, once just a patch of vegetables and a handful of chickens, soon grew beyond anything she had imagined. With investor support and hardworking women by her side, she expanded her land, built proper poultry houses, and installed modern irrigation for her crops. The fields stretched wider, harvests multiplied, and trucks arrived to load produce. What began as survival turned into a full cooperative, owned and managed not only by Emily but also by the very women she had uplifted. Every worker had a share, every effort was fairly rewarded. These women, widows, abandoned wives, single mothers, once cast aside by society, now walked proudly across the fields in their uniforms, earning an income with dignity. Together, they built something powerful. Soon the farm wasn't just feeding Livingstone. It supplied hotels, supermarkets, and even exported produce across borders. Emily's name began to carry weight. People spoke of her not just as a farmer, but as a leader, a woman who turned pain into power. Invitations poured in. She first spoke at a small women's group in Lusaka. Nervous but determined, she shared her story of sacrifice, of being labeled a burden, and of rebuilding her life from nothing. The women wept and applauded. That moment opened the door to more opportunities. Soon, Emily traveled to conferences in Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, speaking about women's empowerment and the silent exploitation many endure within their own families. Each time she stood on stage in her simple, elegant head wrap, her father's words echoed in her heart. "If the world ever forgets your worth, build your own." She told audiences about the night she walked away from her family gathering in Kiwi. Broken yet resolute. She told them how rejection had fueled her to discover her strength. And as she spoke, crowds rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, because her story was their story too. Back in Lusaka, her siblings' lives looked very different. Sifo still rented the same house, struggling to manage bills. Nal jumped from one failed business idea to the next. The aunts continued their gossip, living the same as always. Nothing had changed for them, except now, when people heard Emily's name, they no longer pitied her. They admired her. Emily carried no bitterness toward them anymore. But neither did she carry their burdens. She had built a life of peace, purpose, and respect. A life with a family not of blood, but of loyalty, dignity, and shared struggle. Whenever Emily looked across her thriving fields or stood before thousands of women, she remembered the girl who once cried into her pillow, believing her dreams were gone. That girl was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had risen beyond exploitation. A woman who proved that no one could define her worth but her. Many years later, Sifo walked into Emily's office. The once proud brother who mocked her now looked tired, defeated, and smaller than she remembered. His clothes were worn, his eyes heavy with disappointment, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Cece," he whispered. "I have nothing left. I lost my job. I'm drowning in debt. I need your help." Emily studied him quietly, memories rushing back. How he laughed at her struggles, called her weak, and stood silent when she begged for support. The night they branded her a burden. That pain would never fully fade. But she also remembered the long road she had walked since. The farm, the women she lifted, the speeches she gave, the life she built with her own hands. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes steady. "Sifo," she said softly, I forgive you. Relief flickered across his face. But before he could speak, she added, forgiveness is not an invitation back into my life. I built this not from anger, but from survival. I learned that love without respect is dangerous. I cannot carry you anymore. His face fell. He nodded slowly, realizing her words were final. Emily stood, walked him to the door, and before he left, she whispered the same words her father once wrote to her. If the world ever forgets your worth, build your own. As the door closed, Emily felt no bitterness, only peace. She had honored her father's wisdom. She had found her strength. She had turned wounds into power. And now, she knew one thing for certain. The world would never again forget her worth.